Fin in tech, Fin stands for financial, tech stands for financial technology. Now, specifically refers to any type of technology that's trying to improve or automate financial services. This can range from mobile banking apps to online payment systems. Later, we have cryptocurrencies, investment platforms. What blockchain does is it is a software that creates an immutable series of records. If you've come up with a new product, keep it simple so that your customers can learn how to use it quick, and then they can buy more stuff from you.
Welcome back to the Vibrant Publishers podcast. Today we have with us Dr. Mark Lennon, a tenured professor of innovation at Pennsylvania Western University. He brings over 20 years of teaching experience across the States, Korea, and India. He's an expert in FinTech and AI, and he applies his expertise to support startups and governments. He's a highly sought after speaker on such cutting edge topics. Welcome to the podcast, Mark.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
I'd like to start by asking you what exactly is fintech? Could you break it down in simple terms, and how does it differ from traditional finance?
Sure. I always tell my students this. Anytime you take a word, just break it down, try to figure it out. So Fin in tech, Fin stands for financial, tech stands for financial technology. Now, specifically refers to any type of technology that's trying to improve or automate financial services. This can range from mobile banking apps to online payment systems. Later, we have cryptocurrencies, investment platforms. The goal of FinTech is to basically make financial services easier, faster, cheaper, and more accessible to businesses and individuals.
Got it. So if you had to mention an everyday example where a person would probably be using a fintech tool, could you mention such examples in particular?
Sure. Simple. If I asked you today to go pay for something, right? Would you write a check? No, of course not. Would you pay cash? Yeah, maybe. But more likely, you probably use your mobile phone to pay for goods and services. The way that is used or how advanced that is depends on the countries. Interestingly enough, the United States is actually pretty far behind in technology in the sense that we've got credit cards, everybody uses those, and debit cards, everybody uses those to pay. As opposed to say countries like China, where you've got WeChat and Alipay, and everybody uses mobile phones to interface with payment mechanisms. Yeah.
So you mentioned mobile payment services, and that brings me to the question that are there any common apps or tools that perhaps beginners should learn about when they start learning about fintech?
So you're asking about coding apps and what they can learn and things? Sure. If you were new to programming and don't necessarily have a programming background at all, my recommendation to you is, and I'm doing this for myself, is learn Python. That is an easy programming language to use, and it is used throughout financial services. One of the easy ways to learn Python, by the way, is to interface with, use a some type of generative AI tool, such as OpenAI chatbot. Well, if you have the paid subscription, you can actually ask it to write Python code, and then boom, 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 the Python code will come up. You see that a couple of times, and then you start this, and you can actually, it's cool. They added a new feature. They said, do you want to save the Python code? I'm like, yes, I do, because I know enough about languages and programming to be able to figure it out. So then I talked to a friend of mine who's an expert software programmer, and I was like, does this mean this? Does this mean this? Does this mean this? And they're like, yeah. And you see why I think it would be especially easy for folks in India is you're a multilingual society. So you already speak multiple languages. So you've already had to figure out mentally the syntax, how to say this, how to say that. I speak just a little bit of Bangla. So it's like, Goram chai ka de, and then taking that word and slicing it, a sentence, and slicing it into bits, you can learn aspects of the language. Same thing with looking at Python scripts. by applying how you learn spoken languages, you can learn this language. That would be my recommendation.
Got it. And then there is this one term that keeps coming up in fintech discussions, which is blockchain. Could you break that down for us? How important that becomes in the aspect of fintech?
Sure. Blockchain, if you ask me what are the three greatest developments of the internet, I would say this is number three. Before that, we had the rise of HTML. Then we had the creation of like Google and search engines. And then now blockchain first came out in 2008. A person or persons going by the name of Nakamoto Satoshi, which, by the way, in Japanese is pretty much the equivalent of like John Smith. Okay. What it did was solve a very important computer science problem. I won't bother going into, but what blockchain does is it is a software that creates an immutable series of records. So for those of your listeners, if you've ever seen like an Excel spreadsheet, and you've seen data being added, imagine a spreadsheet that every time you put an entry in, it locks it. It can't be changed afterwards. So the example I like to give of its applications is in the United States, when you buy a car, every time you get the car, you get what's called a title of ownership. All right. If this information were put onto software, such as like a standard database, well, you can always edit the database of who owned what, right? But with a blockchain, it can record, okay, Leah, I'm buying your car. Okay, here's an entry that says, okay, you own it. Where did you buy it from? I don't know. Let's just say a dealership somewhere. Oh, it'll show it in the computer. It's like, okay, you bought this from someplace else. There's no changes to it. All right, now I buy it from you. Transfer of ownership. I can't change it. An application that you, as a recent college graduate, might know about is look at transcripts from colleges and universities. Okay, it records, it stores your grades. You can't change them, and so the integrity of the data is perfect, which makes this an ideal technology for any type of financial services.
Got it. And then there is this other aspect or another sort of element that comes in picture in the fintech industry, which is the idea of fintech startups. Could you define or compare between a fintech startup and traditional banking systems? Would they perhaps replace them in the near future?
Well, you say traditional banking systems, but I would argue that the traditional banking systems actually are the ones who are pushing for fintech startups. Okay. Just like when you say the word startup, you're basically saying a new company that has a new product that is creating some sort of value for the marketplace that did not exist before. All right. So when you say a fintech startup, you're basically saying, okay, it's a startup that's dealing with like financial technologies. I'll give you an example of a company that I'm on the board of, and I know the founders pretty well. It's a company called slicespace.com. It uses blockchain technology, and it allows like people like you or I to buy into a major office building. It's a real estate investment facilitation website. They will fractionalize the ownership to the point where maybe I own 1/1000th or 1/10,000th of an investment. And the way they record that investment is on a blockchain, specifically Algorand, a blockchain. All right. And so what this enables is groups of small investors to pool their money and to invest in a type of asset class like a large commercial real estate they previously could not do before. When you own a building, you gotta pay taxes, you gotta collect rents, you gotta do all these sorts of things. It automates the entire process. And in addition, it's created a marketplace for commercial real estate so that I say, okay, hey, I own, it's like the equivalent of owning shares. It's like I own 100 shares in the Empire State Building, but I want to sell them and reinvest my money. I can do that. Okay. So what's cool is this product offers what's known as liquidity in real estate investment. I mean, if talk to anybody who like owns a house, right? They might have most of their money tied up in the value of their house. But there might be times when, they really need cash. They need to pay bills now. By using this type of blockchain powered technology, owners of commercial property are able to generate capital. They're able to generate cash flow from their buildings while still owning them.
That's a great point. I think fintech is definitely changing the financial landscape, as you said.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then that brings me to the question then, how does fintech technically help people perhaps manage their finances better? Could personal finances have a different outlook because of fintech?
Sure. Couple of ways. First, let's talk about the mobile payment systems. All right. You can now know precisely. I'll talk about my own case. I know precisely how much I'm worth at any given time because I can look on my phone. I can see, okay, how much we have in savings, checking account. I can see, was this bill paid? Was that bill paid? I know precisely where it is. With credit card, look at things from the debt side of things. I can say, okay, how much did my credit, my American Express or my Visa this month, how much am I spending, what kind of payments I have to make. I can oversee my expenditures really, really well, really, really closely. And so that empowers me to manage my money better and more efficiently.
You also mentioned that the idea of tech or fintech, the technology aspect is at the heart of fintech. So, in a way, could you possibly talk about how technology or AI and machine learning can be used in fintech? What are the examples in various ways where people are using AI and fintech together?
Sure, I can give you a general example, then I can give you a specific one that happened in my own life just in these past 2 days. General example is if you've ever interacted with the chat bot, many companies are using them now, is they can automate the customer service experience. All right. So that if you have questions about services offered by, say, like your bank, you might have a question like, well, if I wanted to apply for a loan, what are the steps I need to take? Well, instead of having to search all over the place on a website for that, a large language model trained on the information, say, from a specific bank, can then generate a response very simply, very straightforward, saying, oh, you want to do this? Do A, B, C, and D. Okay. What's great about it is the customization. See, the real power of these, as you mentioned, generative AI, machine learning, et cetera, is that they use natural language processing, NLP. So what that means is back in the day, if you wanted to query a database, you'd have to know like SQL coding, you'd have to say like date equals blah, 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 don't need that. Now, instead, I can just ask like, look at our good old friend ChatGPT. A way I used it for my classes just the other day. It sounds simple, but it's very powerful. I said, okay, I'm creating a syllabus over the next 15 weeks. Classes are Tuesday and Thursday. Generate for me the list of the weeks, the date, time, and date of these classes for each of things, and within seconds, boom, there it all is. By the same token, I could use this, say, like in a fintech example, and I say, okay, show me how much I've spent on my electric bill over the last 2 years. Boom, 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 boom. Okay, show me how much am I, how much money am I spending eating out with my friends over the last year, and how is that impacting my attempts to save for a car? Or, I'm just making up crazy examples, but yeah, by being able to frame your questions in natural language, and then ask the computer for what I'm looking for, is amazing. The customization that we have that can be done. It's interesting in my field. There's a concept known as mass customization, where it's like, an example is like if you buy a new car, You could say, I'll buy the car, but maybe I want, like when we bought my wife's car. Okay, she wants a Subaru, but she wants a blue one. But she wants a blue one, but she wants it with 6 cylinders, not 4 cylinders. And she wants leather, and she wants, all these variables. Okay. And then they don't make it immediately from the factory. Instead, my dealer had to go find one. But imagine if they could immediately make it from the factory, right? That's what generative AI and FinTech is doing for financial services.
So it sounds like a very powerful tool. And that brings me to the note that what do you think fintech would hold in the future, in the next 5 to 10 years? What do you think fintech would look like?
FinTech isn't necessarily replacing the existing financial institutions or financial structure. Instead, it's enhancing and augmenting their processes. All right. With that, however, there are still like consumer needs for, interfacing with your bank to ask it questions, to this sort of stuff. Here in the Pittsburgh area, we have a very large bank. It's called Bank New York Mellon. That's one. Another one is PNC Company. But guess what? They're closing a lot of their branch offices because people don't need them anymore. I mean, would I rather drive 10 miles from here, talk to my local branch teller, try to figure out what's wrong with or right with my account? Or would I rather just do it, either on my mobile device or over the computer? Well, obviously, the second is more convenient. And so to serve their business needs as a commercial bank, they're like, well, guess what? Let's not build these buildings and maintain them for branches because it's expensive. Instead, let's spend more on our technology to serve the same needs for our customers. All right. So when it comes to your question of like, well, where do I see this going? I would say, yeah, it's replacing more human jobs. There's no question. The other thing what's going to happen, I think, in the financial trends is just more of what we've been having now, which is like fraud detection. That's a huge one. By studying patterns of behavior, these machine learning systems can flag anything that's kind of irregular. I'll give you an example. When I traveled to India to teach on my Fulbright, I had one of my Visa cards with me. I attempted to use it. It got declined. Well, thinking it was a fraudulent activity. Well, simple reason was really easy. I live in the United States. I live in Pittsburgh, right? Suddenly I'm buying something in New Delhi. Automatically, Visa said, wait a minute, was this card stolen or whatever? So that's why when you travel abroad and you're intending to use your plastic, always call your bank and let them know where you're going. Otherwise, they will flag something. One time with the same account, something was flagged, and I'm glad it was. Somebody bought like a $2,000 suit in London. Okay, and I was like, well, I like suits, but I wasn't in London. So that's an example of where machine learning helps consumers.
Got it. Those are really great examples that you've given. And lastly, I'd like to ask you if there's any quick tips that you would like to give to future entrepreneurs of fintech, for example, the fintech startups that we spoke about, or for anyone who wants to learn about fintech in general. Are there any resources or quick tips that you could give them?
Sure. Well, the quick tip when it comes to startups and things is it's always good to have a great idea. Okay. And it's always good if you think it's going to be successful. But before putting a lot of resources into it, test it. All right. I've seen way too many startups think, oh, this is going to be a great idea. People are going to love it. But guess what? Whatever problem they were solving, it wasn't a problem, or it was they didn't but consumers didn't need a new solution just for anything. Okay, it's called identifying the market, knowing that there's an actual need for it. One way of doing this, especially for high tech companies, is we develop what's called an MVP, minimal viable product. All right, so for example, let's look at the company Amazon. When Jeff Bezos started Amazon, there were plenty of other companies out there that were online shopping malls. Okay. The problem is nobody was really using them because people didn't trust it. All right. Having said that, Bezos was brilliant because what did Amazon start out with? Books. Okay. Here's a book. When I go to I know the title. Okay. Highly selective dictionary, right? If I go to a bookstore and look it up, I'll just buy it. Will I sit there and try to test the binding to see how strong it is? No, of course not. Hence, when Bezos first started, he said, hey, you need this title? Great. I can give it to you for half the price that you would buy at a bookstore. Am I going to buy it? Yes. So then it comes into the area of what's called technology adoption. People got used to it. People start trusting it. In the same way, my recommendation for your startup companies is pick one product, make it real easy, then train your customers on how to buy it. If you've come up with a new product, keep it simple so that your customers can learn how to use it quick, and then they can buy more stuff from you.
Thank you so much, Mark. Those were really, really good examples that you've given out there and quite apt, in fact. So, thank you for sharing your valuable insights on FinTech. And it's clear that FinTech is not just a buzzword, but a very powerful force that we require, and we will be using it for the future. I'd also like to tell our listeners that don't forget to subscribe to our channel and stay tuned for more insightful conversations. Until next time, be innovative and stay curious.